And what we found is that there are no real standards of care governing any of this. To be clear, there are standards of care, quote unquote, on paper, and they're provided by the transgender activist group WPATH. WPATH standards are used by major hospitals in this country, including UCLA, UCSF, Mass General, just to name a few. How rigorous are these standards exactly? Well, after a 22-minute video call, the largest trans healthcare provider in the country, carefully following the WPATH guidelines, approved one of my producers, Greg Ray, for an orchiectomy. That means testicle removal. Now, 22 minutes would be a record time to get approved for an orchiectomy if you had a real medical reason for it, like testicular cancer. It's insane to approve any serious procedure that quickly, having just met a patient in a video call for the first time, but that's what happened. And we recorded the whole call. At no point did anyone at this healthcare provider, which is called Plume, push back in any way. They didn't suggest that maybe this was a rash course of action. They didn't verify any of the information Greg provided, including his fake name that he gave them. All Plume did was insist that he pay $150. If Greg did that, they promised to write him a medically sound letter in support of life-altering surgery. That letter, under the WPATH standards, is required for anyone trying to get transgender surgery in the United States. You have to get one of these letters from a healthcare provider and then present it to your surgeon. And Plume rubber-stamped Greg's letter in 22 minutes. And not all that time was spent discussing the surgery, by the way. Some of the conversation was about traffic and the weather. As I speak, we've uploaded footage of the call on Twitter. You can watch it there right now. In a moment, we'll show you parts of it. In this video call, Greg assumed the name Chelsea Bussey. He didn't dress up as a woman. He didn't wear any women's clothing or makeup or any of that. He didn't go to Party City and dye his hair blue. He just told them he identified as a woman and that he was taking hormones prescribed by his father. Greg couldn't even pronounce the name of the surgery he wanted. He called it an orchidectomy. He claimed at one point that the reason he wanted the surgery is that it would speed up his non-existent transition, which the Plume nurse said didn't make any sense from a medical perspective, but none of that raised any red flags for Plume. The nurse told Greg she wanted to write him the strongest letter she could anyway. Watch.
So you're currently on estrogen. You're taking 6 milligrams a day.
Twice a day. Yeah, right. You got it.
So you're taking 1.5 tablets a day? Okay. And then, I guess, the system, let's see if we can significant history. All right. Okay, so let's kind of get into this a little bit. So you are seeking what surgery? Things that are of course you probably don't know, things that are irreversible when it comes to estrogen-based therapy is breast development and testicular shrinkage, right? But there's always a possibility for hair growth to come back. That may change with orchiectomy. Once you stop, once you don't no longer have your testes, you no longer have the ability for your teeth to convert to DHT because you don't have as much teeth, right? So hair growth, facial and body hair may change after orchiectomy. Fat redistribution is affected by the estrogen. So you may have less of a change in fat redistribution if you ever stop eating, but it may change as a whole. So it kind of does have a benefit without the spironolactone, but you still probably would definitely want to take estrogen as long as you right.
I'm not complaining about the daily pills, just to be clear. I'm just saying if it accelerates it and makes things faster, then that's better.
Give me a little bit of history with your gender dysphoria. That may kind of help me. I want to make this letter as solid as possible to be like, this orchiectomy is definitely needed.
I'll tell you, I'm happy to. So when I was in school, and I actually wrote a big essay for admission to a club about how I didn't feel like my biological sex went along with how I felt, and I told people that, and they thought it was ridiculous. So because they thought I just looked like a guy, so they like this is ridiculous.
Now, a couple of days after that discussion, as we document on Twitter, Plume sent Greg a letter diagnosing him with significant and ongoing gender dysphoria. Therefore, Plume said he was an appropriate candidate for orchiectomy. According to Plume, testicle removal would help Greg make significant progress in alleviating his dysphoria. Now, Even after Greg followed up with text messages to Plume explaining that he doesn't have dysphoria, they didn't retract or amend that letter in any way. There's no excuse for that, obviously. Plume had multiple opportunities to tell the truth in their letter, and they chose not to. In his intake form, Greg indicated he didn't have dysphoria for 6 months or more. Didn't have it. That means under the current version of the DSM, he never should have been diagnosed with gender dysphoria in the first place. But Plume never once asked Greg about this in his video interview. Instead, they just said that he had dysphoria in the letter, which they intended to be used by a surgeon who would then carve up Greg's testicles. Why didn't Plume amend the letter once they were made aware that Greg didn't have dysphoria? As Plume's nurse explained, in order for the surgery to be paid for, quote unquote, the diagnosis would need to remain. In other words, insurance companies won't pay for the operation unless the letter contains a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, so they're going to put that diagnosis in there regardless. That's why Plume uses templates that include the gender dysphoria diagnostic code. It appears very much so that they plug whatever information patients feed them into this generic template, whether or not those patients actually have the diagnosis. The templates are provided by WPATH, by the way, and Plume admitted that to us.